think we'll start. Good evening, councillors and officers, and good evening to members of the public who are watching on the broadcast, and welcome to our Planning Committee meeting this 28th of May 2024. Thank you for attending this. I know it's a short agenda, but we've felt that it was important that we got these applications determined, so rather than making the applicant wait a further 3 weeks to put them on to the next agenda. So we'll move on to the agenda items. The first item of agenda, item 1, apologies for absence. We only have one apology this evening. It is from Councillor Beavis, who doesn't have a substitute. I'd also just like to introduce you to Jason Bishop, who is our senior planning lawyer, who's attending on an observational purpose this evening. Item 2 on the agenda, declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest or non-pecuniary interest related to items of the agenda in regard to the Code of Conduct for members? Councillor Bowers.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I'd like to disclose an MPI in items 5A and 5B as the portfolio holder for assets at Braintree District Council because of the ownership of the land involved in both applications. For transparency, I will need to leave the meeting for both of those items. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowers. Anybody else? No, that's it. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is minutes of the previous meeting. We have had circulated the minutes of the meetings on the 16th of April. Oh, sorry, the 7th of May. 16th of April are not ready. Oh, sorry, they are there. So they are there. And we have, sorry, and the 7th of May, just reading from my agenda. So is it your wish that I sign these as correct
Madam Chairman, that's a true reflection.
Thank you, members. All in favour? Thank you. I'll just sign those minutes then. Item 4 is public question time. We don't have any speakers on general matters this evening, so we'll just move on to the planning applications. Item 5, and Councillor Bowers will now leave us. The first application this evening is application number 23/02991 full, which is land south of 4 Little Hyde Close, Great Yeldham. We don't have any speakers on that application, so we will move straight to the presentation. From who's going to? Suzanne's going to give that for us.
Thank you. Good evening, members. This is an application for the erection of one 3-bed chalet bungalow on land to the south of 4 Hyde Close, Great Yeldham. So you can see the application site outlined in red. It comprises of access, long access, and the area of the proposed dwellings in this location. It's surrounded by residential properties, and there's a public right-of-way along the boundaries of the site shown by the dotted line. This is outside the application site. The access also provides access to the rear of these properties in Leather Lane. So we'll just run through some photographs. This is a photograph taken from Little Hyde Road showing the existing access. And this is a photograph showing the site from the end of the access. And this is a photograph from within the site looking towards the rear of the properties in Little Hyde Close, which back onto the access tracks, the access track runs along that location. This is the image of the overgrown footpath, which is currently impassable along the boundary, western boundary of the site. And this is a view taken from this southeastern corner of the plot, and that's looking towards the rear of the properties in Highfields. And this shows the existing access at that point, public right of way, and the existing properties that face onto Leather Lane. So this application has been subject to two previous applications, both which were refused. So just to give you a bit of a context. Firstly, this was a scheme for a pair of semi-detached two-storey dwellings within the application site, and this was refused due to an adverse impact on the character of the area, poor amenity standards for prospective occupiers, adverse impact on neighbours' amenities, and lack of information regarding impact on trees and waste collection. So following that refusal, this application was submitted to try and overcome the reasons for refusals. However, officers felt that it didn't, and it was refused on the same grounds as the previous application. So moving on to the current application, this is a block plan. So there is one detached 1.5 storey dwelling situated within the centre of the site, with parking to the side and amenity space surrounding. This shows the access, so this is the access from Little Hyde Road, and this shows the parking arrangement and the fact that it's possible to enter and leave the site in a forward gear. So this is the proposed design. So it's a 1.5 storey in height with a gabled end and a dormer on the front elevation. And the proposed materials are white render above a brick plinth and a plain tiled roof. Exact details of this will be secured by condition. However, officers feel this is inappropriate for the context of the surrounding area. In terms of the floor plan, it shows a 3-bedroom dwelling which meets the national space standards. And this shows the property in context. Although it's a street scene, there's not much of a street scene that it sits within, but officers feel that it is compatible with the surrounding area. So in summary, and the site is located within the development boundary where the principle of development is acceptable. The proposal overcomes previous concerns and provides a suitable standard of external and internal amenity for potential occupiers. The proposal would not appear out of character with the locality. Parking and access and refuse collection is all considered acceptable, and there would be no unacceptable impact on neighbourhood amenities. And the recommendation this evening is to grant the application subject to the conditions set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Members would like to kick off. Oh, Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the architect is finally to be congratulated for this because knowing the area as I do, there are numerous dwellings around and about which actually have similar architectural features, the hipping and what have you, and the heights of the building, which I think is always commendable. We do, after all, want new buildings to sit comfortably amongst the existing ones. What I did want to ask is, if we go back to the tracking plan, which is 3 or 4 slides back, that one, on the front elevation, you've got a square rectangle, call it what you will, which is amenity space. And what interests me is there is already proposed parking and turning space. But I think all of us would recognise that the car which is furthest to the back of the house can't get out unless the other one's not there. And so if we grant this consent, can you tell me how secure we can feel that that is actually what will happen if consented? Because another alternative would quite clearly be to pave over that section, which is called amenity space, and park 2 cars so that either of them in theory could get out. So this is just a question about how secure can we be that parking and what have you arrangements as proposed will in actual fact come in the long term to pass. Thank you.
Susanna, if you could answer that. Thanks.
So in terms of the parking arrangement, obviously this forms part of the approved plans, so the development would have to be carried out in accordance with this approved plans. In terms of conditions, I was just checking, we have suggested a condition to remove permitted development rights for the extension of the buildings and alteration to the actual dwelling. But if members felt it was necessary, we could impose a condition to restrict hard standings. I mean, just to say in terms of the amenity standards that we require, that area to the front of the property is not included within that calculation. So regardless, if, for example, that bit was to be used as parking, the property would still have adequate private amenity space.
Councillor Abbott.
Yeah, a couple of points, please, Madam Chairman. In the description in the report, it describes the site as overgrown scrub with mature trees. The photographs the officer showed appeared to show that everything pretty much above a few feet high has been cut down. And previously you said that the refused consents were on the basis of impact on trees. So does that mean we've already lost them before we've started, or is that referring to trees outside the red line?
So in terms of my awareness of the application, obviously the applications go back some time. I don't know what was originally on the site, but in terms of the application, in terms of what the report is talking about, and the previous refusal, it was referring to the trees that are along outside the application site, but close to the boundaries.
Okay, thank you. And then 2 other points. We've got a very similar application coming up, and this one has a vehicle charging condition, but the next one doesn't. And this one has no lighting condition, but the next one does. So would it be possible to be consistent, which would mean this one would have a lighting condition? Thank you.
Yes, certainly that can be added.
Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. If anyone is watching this evening, then this application should serve as a good indication that just because it's land that's been previously owned by BDC, it's still put through the same process that anyone would apply for planning permission for. And it's good that we've now settled on this size and scale of a development, because this really is a small dwelling plot and not a plot for a large semi-detached 2-dwelling proposal. I think this one is much more suited for the size and scale for the land that it's sitting on. I think all in all, I fall to the side of Officer's recommendations to grant this application. I think it's a much more favourable approach to previous applications, notwithstanding the comments that Councillor Holland made about the hard standing. To be completely honest, I'm fairly nonplussed about whether or not it's hard standing or not, but that's just my own opinion. I will see what the consensus is when it comes to the vote, but in this instance, I think the development is more than acceptable for what's being proposed this evening. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
I will just comment to that myself. I mean, I do know this. This is very close to my ward, and I know this site, this area of Great Yeldham extremely well. The thing I like about this dwelling is that it's going to be at the end of a little small, well, sort of like a cul-de-sac. So you will, when you look down the track, you will see quite an attractive building at the end, and it is obviously, I'm sure, will be much more. Have much greater amenity actually than an area of undeveloped sort of effectively scrub. I too am not too fussed about the hard standing as to whether to require a future occupant if they wish to change their parking arrangements to do that. But that's again my personal opinion. Councillor Schwer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd just like to support the comments that Councillor Ritchie just made, and I also don't feel that I can support the amenity as well, because it is quite considerably built there, and it's a small size plot, and I think limiting that would very much limit the ability of residents to enjoy whatever they have around there. I think it's kind of over planning really for its use. And I think some flexibility in rural life is important. Thank you.
Could I just clarify Councillor Abbott's point about the lighting condition? What would be the lighting condition? Because obviously this is in a much more built-up area than the subsequent application.
The condition that could be imposed would be that prior to the installation, details of any proposed external lighting to the site should be approved in writing by the local planning authority.
Yeah, I think that's fine for me. It's not an ecological sort of lighting one. It's just a general external lighting. Okay. Does anybody else wish to have any comment on this application? If not, would anybody like to move officer's recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Ritchie, and a seconder. Does that find a seconder? Councillor Holland. Okay, so it's been moved by Councillor Ritchie and seconded by Councillor Holland that we grant this application. All those in favour of granting the application? That is.
Sorry, is that with,
that's with the. Sorry, can I just clarify?
Condition?
With the additional lighting condition. Is everybody happy with that? Yes, thank you.
Okay, not the hard standing one.
But not the hard standing one. Is everybody happy with that? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, members. That has been granted with that additional condition. Right, we'll now move on to item 5B on the agenda, which is planning application number 24/00330 full, which is land adjacent to 1 Church Road, Stambourne. And we do have a speaker on that application this evening, is Mr. Michael Jones from the applicant. If you'd like to come to the table and just have 3 minutes to make your statement and press the button on the microphone. Thank you.
I first wish to thank the committee for allowing me the opportunity to speak on this subject this evening. A previous application for this site, which proposed 2 dwellings, was presented to the committee but refused as the scheme was considered to contrast the pattern of the local development and would not be in keeping with the street scene. The scheme, which is to be considered this evening, addresses those previous concerns by compromising of a single dwelling with a relatively simplistic facade like that of the adjoining bungalows and would be in keeping with the rhythm of the street scene. The parish council rejected to the initial proposal, but following receipt of revised plans and submission of an ecological impact assessment report were reconsulted without objection. I do now believe previous concerns have been addressed and therefore ask the committee to support the planning officer's recommendation for approval. Committee, once again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Stambourne. So this is the application site. The majority of it lies within the development. The majority of it lies within the village envelope for Stambourne and is a gap between two residential dwellings. Some photographs of the site. So this is the application site viewed from Church Road, and you can see the front boundary treatment, which is shown as being retained. This is a view looking across the site to the neighbouring bungalow. And this is a view from within the site to looking towards Church Road. This is the eastern boundary as viewed from within the site. And this is a closer photograph of the neighbouring bungalow. So you can see it's got a side elevation with no windows facing the application site. So this is the application site showing the front boundary and the existing access. And this is the street scene looking eastwards. And the street scene looking westwards. So you can see there's a mixture of bungalows and two-storey dwellings in the locality. So the report refers to the site, to the front part of the site being within the development boundary. So this is an extract from the local plan. The black line is the development boundary, and this is the application site here. So it cuts through the site, and the area of the proposed dwelling is within the development boundary. So again, this is an application which has planning history. And this was an application that was previously refused for two detached dwellings on the site, and this application was refused due to the proposal being out of keeping with the identity, spacing and rhythm of the street scene and not reflecting the scale and design of surrounding development. So moving on to the current proposal, it shows one detached dwelling in this location. The blue line denotes the development boundary, with parking to the front of the dwelling and access from the existing access point. So this shows the proposed elevations. See, this simplistic front elevation corresponds with the neighbouring bungalow, whereas there's more concentration of built form to the rear, with the rear gabled, rear dormer and the rear gable projection. It's proposed to cover the issue of materials as part of a condition, and overall officers consider this design to be acceptable. The floor plans show a 5-bedroom dwelling with a separate study split over 2 floors, and the proposal meets with national space standards. This shows a street scene and section, and you can see the similarities in design and height to the existing neighbouring bungalow. So in summary, the northern section of the site where the dwelling is proposed is within the development boundary, where the principle of development is acceptable. The proposed design and appearance would be compatible with the surrounding street scene. Parking, access and refuse collection is all considered acceptable, and it's considered there'd be no unacceptable adverse impact upon neighbouring residential amenity. The application is therefore recommended for approval subject to the conditions set out in the report and an additional condition raised by Councillor Abbott in terms of vehicle charging condition. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Members? Councillor Abbott?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I think this is done very well. If you look at the way it's sort of divided into 3, to keep the bit outside the boundary in the garden, the housing bit within the village boundary, but the house also set back from those trees at the front. I think that's well done, so that meets sort of policy criteria. Yes, and glad we're going to be consistent and put the EV charging in. My only concern is the potential loss of the trees at the front, which the plans clearly rely on. If you know, as we went through, those trees are shown there consistently, and they're quite prominent in the street scene. And I'm hoping the developer won't just, as many do, either take some of them out, despite what we've said, or all of them. Is there anything more we can do to make sure that doesn't happen, given that they're not a constraint on the development?
Pass it over to you, Suzanne.
Yeah, so in terms of the conditions we've put on, we have recommended that an arboricultural method statement and detailed tree protection plan should be submitted prior to the commencement of development. And the reason for that is to ensure the protection and retention of those existing trees at the front of the site. And they're also shown on the approved plan. So, yeah, we have officers feel that that's covered by that condition.
Thank you. Councillor Shafir.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think this is this planning application before us tonight for this particular site, taking into consideration the aspect change from two principal buildings down to one, actually gives a very spacious feel. And as was mentioned by our speaker earlier tonight about rhythm in the street scene, and I think that really does indicate that rhythm, because those of you who've been through Stambourne will understand what is referenced by that. And it also reflects previous spacing through the village there. So I agree with that, and I'm very supportive of the planning recommendation tonight. And I do support the EV vehicle charging addition as the lighting conditions already in there. And of course, I was pleased that it was mentioned about the arboricultural report as well. So I think overall the design is very good, and the built form, once completed, actually will sit very well in this village scene and be an addition to Stambourne and the residents, and supporting the community living there.
Could I just ask, Suzanne, in relation to the boundary treatment, and obviously clearly from the photographs there's a lot of hedging slash scrub that has sort of grown into the site. Would the condition 5, the arboricultural method statement, would that also cover how that boundary will be treated, and what will be retained of that hedging?
So that would it would cover, yeah, the boundary. Well, it would cover the existing trees along there and any vegetation along there, and also to cover any proposed boundary treatment if they were looking to put, for example, a fence or a wall or something. That would also be covered by condition number 9, which is a landscaping condition as well. And, condition 7 as well, which says all gates and fences and means of enclosure should be approved.
I just wasn't sure that the condition 5 actually covered, included the sort of hedging along the edge of the boundaries. It's particularly that boundary to the east. And possibly the boundary to the rear. I seem to remember from I do remember this previous application that there was quite substantial sort of hedging, I think, along the rear of the boundary. I just wanted to check that condition would also require a sort of assessment, really, of not just the trees at the front, but sort of hedging around the edge of the boundary.
Yes, it would, in terms of the reasoning put behind that, is to for the retention of existing remaining shrubs and hedges. We could put an informative, add an informative to make that clearer to the applicant if necessary for extra protection.
I'd quite like that, thank you. Any other members wish to make a comment on this? The only other comment I'd like to make is that the parish council's concerns initially have been taken into account by officers. Well, members, I think we've finished discussing that item. Would anybody like to move officer's recommendation? Councillor Ritchie?
Move officer's recommendation with the informative around the additional hedging.
And the additional condition of the electric charging point. Yeah. Seconded Councillor Abbott. All those in favour of granting the application? That again is unanimous. Thank you very much, members. I think that more or less brings us to the end of our meeting this evening, because there are no other items really on the agenda. Thank you very much for your attendance, and I'm sure the next meeting will be a lot longer than this one.